What's going on with you guys? You know who it is. It's your boy John Mike, and I wanted to hit you guys with this quick video on Keyscape, kind of an update. I've had this for about a month or so, month and a half, 2 months, something like that. Came out. I got it like day one. It came out. Um, but I get a lot of messages and I see a lot of things floating around from a lot of people that are saying, "Yo, Keyscape, it's very CPU intensive. It doesn't really work on older machines and all that kind of stuff like that." So I wanted to do a video to kind of address that to show people that hey, it does work on the older machines. I'm actually running this on a 2008 Mac Pro. 2008 Mac Pro. I'm gonna show you my specs really quick. Let's check it out. So I'm gonna go over here about this Mac just to kind of show you to make sure that you know. Then I'm gonna tell you some different things that I've learned to help with the CPU and with all of that. But as you can see here, maybe a little hard to read depending on how your screen is. Mac Pro early 2008 is It's an 8-core 2 by 3 gigahertz. I only got 8 gigs of RAM on this thing. 8 gigs of RAM. It's got a regular internal. It's actually got two internal 7200 RPM drives, no SSD, anything like that. So I'm running it here inside of Studio One 3. I'm just playing random chords, but as you can see, maybe 25% CPU. Now that is pretty heavy, but it's not spiking. A lot of people, and this is the C7 grand patch that a lot of people have problems with that. Now I'm gonna just kind of give some of my speculations based on my test and some of the things that I've done to kind of help with your CPU and making sure that it is optimum and it is able to handle it. Now, inside of Studio One here, I'm running this at a buffer of about 512. Honestly, with Studio One and this machine that I'm working on, I could probably up this to about 1012 and I won't experience any latency. That will help on my CPU. So if I do that really quick, you'll kind of see the difference in the CPU. So if I jump to 1024, hit OK. I don't have any latency. Give me a second here. My little thing kind of stops here with Soundcloud where I'm using for my video, and I have to kind of update it. No latency. But now I got back up to 20, but it's about maybe 10% less CPU when I run at 1020, 24. What's it called? Studio One 3 is really good about CPU. Logic, once you start to get up to like 1024, you start experiencing latency. Same thing with main stage. So you may want to try it in a less CPU intensive DAW like Studio One 3. Ableton is also really good on the CPU. I personally use it a lot here in Studio One 3 and don't have any issues with it. Second thing, in the settings that you can do to make sure that your CPU is better, go here to settings and turn on thinning on the patches that you're using. What it does, I'm not sure exactly what it does. You'd have to ask Spectrasonics exactly what it does. But all I know is it helps with the CPU when you have thinning on, and the patches take less time to load when you click on them. Other thing, speaking of loading, you always want to make sure that your patch completes loading before you start really playing and digging into it. If I hit here on the C7 Rock, you can see this please wait is going up. Yellow means, hey, you can kind of start playing, but it might not be totally ready. Once this kind of disappears, you know all of your samples have pretty well loaded and it says complete. You know, really good. And so you know it's that if you try to play a lot of times while that red is going or that yellow is going, sometimes you'll experience some issues. Another thing with another thing with your the patches, you know, with getting your CPU down low. Try lowering your voices. And I know a lot of people have said this, but now when I had that C7, let me pull the C7 back up. Up here, this initial grand patch I'm gonna let it load up. I was actually running this full on, other than the thinning. I had it at 64 voices. It's dropped back down to 32 since I loaded it, but I actually had it full all the way up to 64 voices. But you can lower this, you can lower it all the way down, and this kind of helps with the CPU. So if I go down to like 16 voices, for instance, it should help a little bit more with the CPU as well. So as you can see, it may be a little hard to see there, but CPU is sitting around 10-15%. Look at even lower than that, 7, there's 10, 9, 12. I mean, just by dropping it down to 16 voices, my CPU dropped significantly. Now, here's the thing that I think is the most important when it comes to making sure that you get a great experience out of Keyscape. Number one, especially with an older machine, the newer Macs and the newer computers have USB 3 and Thunderbolt and all of this stuff on it. Much faster data transfer, because I think the CPU spikes, just from my experience, come from when you are using slower drives to stream the audio from the computer, from the hard drive to the plug-in on the computer, and it's not loading the samples aren't coming in fast enough, and it just doesn't it can't keep up with it, and the CPU starts to kind of spike and stuff. Now that is what my experience has been like when I've had it on. Like I had it on this particular, I'll pull it up here, you may can see this little external hard drive. I had Keyscape on this drive. It's just a regular Best Buy hard drive that didn't cost me much or nothing, and I had it on there, and I had it plugged into what is a USB 2.0 USB 2.0 USB port, and it just, it was sucky. It just, I kept getting spikes and all of that. So I have a secondary hard drive here inside of my Mac Pro. You guys can't see it, it's off camera, but this is the computer. I have a secondary hard drive. So what I did was I moved the Steam folder inside of Keyscape onto my internal secondary drive that is connected to its bus. It's a bus, it's connected serious to the SATA bus or what have you, and the data transfer is a whole lot faster. It's a 7200 RPM drive, which is one of the fastest hard drives you can get. I know they got some faster hard drives, but standard 7200, most, it's either 54 or 72 nowadays, or SSD. Those are pretty much the three categories that you look. This is a 7200 RPM drive that I have this on the Steam folder. Since moving the Steam folder from my external hard drive that was USB 2.0, 5400 RPM USB 2.0 drive, when I moved it to my internal drive, I stopped having those CPU issues. It just, Keyscape just works and functions totally perfect. I never have any issues out of it since then. Again, this is running on a 2008 Mac Pro, no issues. So it will work on the older Macs. You just have to make sure your system is optimized enough to be able to handle, I guess, what they would call the throughput of all of these samples coming in. Now, when I had my external drive, I had it on my external drive. When I pulled up like the electric pianos and the Keybase stuff and the gospel stuff that they had no problems with those patches because they weren't sample intensive. But this C7 Grand is very sample intensive. Now, don't quote me on this, but I want to say I heard Eric Pearson say in an interview that we were talking about that it was like well over 100,000 samples that they put into this C7. So you got 100,000 samples trying to stream from a little drive into it just can't handle the throughput either way. Whether it's 100,000 or 10,000, that's still a lot of samples. But yeah, so that's my whole thing on that. I wanted to kind of share this because I see a lot going around with a lot of people talking and bashing Keyscape and telling people don't buy it because it's it's ill-informed decision, ill-informed information because they bought it, their system wasn't optimized, or they didn't know how to optimize their system in order to capitalize on this particular instrument. because it's wonderful. It's honestly one of the best investments I've made this year is buying Keyscape. So I do not regret it. I just had to figure out how to get my system optimized to where we work. So my suggestions that you take away from this: if you're gonna buy a Keyscape, this is what you need to do. If you got an older Mac, 2010, 2000, I got a 2008 Mac Pro. I also have a 2010 MacBook Pro. My suggestion would be for you to put it on a external. If you're going to use an external hard drive, make sure that the external hard drive is a 7200 RPM drive, the fastest hard disk drive you can get. Or if you can get an external SSD, I'm sure your results would be a whole lot better. Second thing is making sure that you get if you don't have an external drive, you don't want to go to external drive route. There's a lot of people that are getting into the revolution of taking their CD drive out of their MacBook Pro, for instance, because I know a lot of people who use this on a MacBook, and putting another secondary hard drive in place of the CD drive. So you could take out your CD drive and put an SSD in there, and then put Keyscape on the secondary drive. Now, one thing I've learned about Spectrasonics products, Omnisphere, Keyscape, the Steam folder, which is the folder that houses all of the samples, the plugin lives on your internal drive, but the Steam folder that has all of the samples and all the sounds on it, oftentimes does not like to be on the same drive with the plugin. You have issues with it. I've had issues with it over the years using Omnisphere, and if I had Omnisphere installed on the same drive, I would have all kind of crazy things that would happen. So I remember reading in forums and people talking and saying, put it on a different, folder. Once I did put it on a different drive, once I did that with Omnisphere, it had no issues. Same thing with Keyscape. So I would suggest that you go ahead and try putting it on a secondary drive that is SATA powered, which would be using your internal drive, a secondary internal drive, or if you have a Mac Pro like I have, do what I do, put it on a secondary internal drive. Either way, it's going to be faster transfer than USB is going to be. If you have a secondary internal drive on your Mac Pro or your MacBook Pro, it's going to be faster data transfer of the samples from your drive than it would be if you were using a external hard drive on USB 2.0. All right. Those are some of my suggestions as far as the sample handling. I think if you do that, it handles a lot of the other issues that people have. Second thing is thinning. Make sure you turn thinning on. That helps with your patches and loading and all of that. And then beyond that, your voices. Try decreasing your voices from, I think by default it may come in at 64 or even 32. Try dropping it down to 16, and you'll have better results. Those are some of my things that I found have made my experience with using Keyscape a whole lot better. As you can see, look at that. I'm getting 10% CPU. No issues here. 2008 Mac Pro running Keyscape, no problems. Just wanted to post this and get this out there. So the people who are always talking about telling people that their computer is not strong enough or whatever the case may be, or it's too old, or it's not enough RAM. I only got 8 gigs of RAM on this thing. It has traditional hard drives in it. Yeah, it's a quad core. Not a quad core, but it's an 8 core. But hey, it handles it a whole lot well. Now, I would not suggest putting this on a dual core machine. You may be asking for some issues there if you go too old, if you go something that's got a Core 2 Duo on it, 2006 MacBook Pro or a 2006 MacBook, the white MacBook, you may be asking for some problems with something like that. Make sure that you have a system that is comparable. If you have trouble with other plugins, then you're gonna have major problems with this. So that's the gauge. If you got a system that handles all your other plugins well, you run Contact stuff, you run Silent and other instruments, and you don't have any problems with it, your system should handle Keyscape fairly well. Whether it's an iMac or a MacBook Pro or a Mac Pro, those are my suggestions. Hope it helps somebody. Hope it blessed it. If you're on YouTube, if you're watching this on YouTube, because I'm posting this on Facebook and on YouTube, if you're watching this on YouTube, please do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. I release content and things like this quite often. I like to do a lot of plug-in reviews and things of that nature. So it's good stuff that's on this channel. I got a ton of other stuff you can go through and look at. All right, I'm out. Holla at your boy.